Tomorrow is the 4th of July, and I know there's going to be lots of campfires, bonfires, and people's houses on fire. So what the heck, here are some allegedly true scary campfire stories. These stories are all woodsy and to me made for some good campfire-style tales. Enjoy, and be sure to send me your scary stories at darkstories.org so I can narrate them. Also, check out eeriecast.com for loads more scary podcasts. Quick question, are you guys enjoying the Tales from the Break Room compilations I've been uploading? Anyway, let's begin, and I hope you have a safe and awesome 4th of July 2022. Under the Floor, from George 1997. This happened to me, my brother, and our girlfriends. I was 23 at the time, and after this, my brother and I convinced my dad to sell the place. It was a Tuesday, and I had a week off work. My younger brother had recently been fired from his retail job. He got fired because he was taking some overly long smoke breaks. We decided to take our girlfriends up to our father's cabin for a few days. It's located around Gravenhurst, Ontario. It's a pretty cool area. The cabin was about 25 minutes from town and 15 minutes from our closest neighbors. Basically, it was nice and remote, a private area. Or so we thought. We left Toronto around 5 a.m., and we got to the cabin around 8 a.m. I drove up in my old 95 Chevy Tahoe. My girlfriend, Marie, was in the passenger seat. My brother Mike and his girlfriend Anne were in the back. The cabin itself was a small raised cabin. 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. Outside there was a parking area, some field area, a small fire pit with benches, and the woods beyond, as well as a good-sized half-workshed, half-garage building, about 40 feet away from the cabin. Our mom and dad built it that far so she wouldn't have to hear the tomfoolery that went on from another of my dad's projects. But my dear old dad hadn't been up to the cabin much since our mom passed away from cancer a few years back. At 8 a.m. we unloaded the coolers and our tied-down bags from off the truck and went up the steps, unlocking the old wooden door, and we went inside to make some breakfast. Marie and I claimed the larger bedroom. Being the older brother comes with some perks. After frying up some bacon and eggs, peppers and onions, and toast, putting together our westerns, we sat on the futon couches in the living room, talking and enjoying the morning. After breakfast, I wanted to relax for a while with my girlfriend. We went to our room and took a nap until about 1 p.m. Then we went out to the fire pit where Mike and Ann had apparently spent the remainder of the morning together, smoking and stirring their small campfire. We sat around the fire for a while. Ann and Mike were arguing about something at some point. Ann claimed she saw something a few hours ago hiding behind the garage. She said it was a short, skinny, dark, shadowy man peeking out from a corner of the garage. But Mike was convinced she was just trying to freak him out, or that she just saw one of the pine trees swaying in the wind over near the garage. But Ann was adamant, angrily going back into the cabin. "Nice going, bro," I said, patting him on the back. He shook his head and lit another cigarette, complaining to Marie and I before we went on to other topics. Suddenly, we heard a scream coming from the cabin. We all stood up and turned to see Anne waving her arms for us to come inside from the large window. We looked to each other and shrugged, then threw some dirt on the fire before walking back into the cabin. Despite Anne's urgent waves, we weren't really in a hurry. Once inside, she locked the door behind us and demanded to be taken home. We asked what she was on about. She explained she saw it again, this black figure. She saw it on the deck through the glass door. It crawled off of the deck and underneath the house. She could even hear it scratching at the floor right where she stood, and that's what made her scream. My brother and I were thinking maybe it was a possum or skunk, that she had scared it so it ran off under the house. We were about to go out to see, but she stopped us, saying it was too dangerous. We convinced her it was probably some small critter just living under the cabin. We tried to get her to calm down, but she got us to stay indoor the rest of the day playing old board games like Scrabble. We snacked and drank some beers from the cooler. Around 10 p.m., when we were about to go to bed, we heard the scratching Anne had described before. It certainly was coming from under the floor in the hallway. It seemed to be making its way to where we were in the living room. Anne grabbed tightly onto Mike's arm, terror in her eyes, but Mike, Marie, and I were unfazed. I suggested we go out and scare whatever was under the house with some flashlights, bang some sticks together, and make some noise. Mike interrupted that idea by slamming his feet on the floor. The scratching suddenly stopped for a minute. But then it came back, more vicious than before. Annoyed, I got up to go outside, but when I was putting on my shoes and looking out the windows, I saw dark shapes moving in the field and around the cabin. I said out loud, "What the heck?" I grabbed a flashlight and pressed both my face and the flashlight against the glass. There must have been around 8 shadowy figures roaming around the cabin. I managed to catch one of their legs in the light of my flashlight, but it was still too fast. From what I saw, the leg was black and leathery against the green grass. Then one of those creatures slammed right up against the glass where my face was. I flew back, everyone screaming behind me. Outside, we heard screeches surrounding the building. Some came from under the house, too. Some were even on top of the roof. There was banging on the walls and scratching everywhere. I ran into the larger bedroom, grabbing the rifle my dad kept in the closet. Then I ran back into the living room, aiming it at the floor where I'd heard one of those things scratching. At the same time, my brother, Anne, and Marie had acquired knives from the kitchen. They'd huddled on top of the coffee table that was struggling under their combined weight. I fired off a shot at the floor. Right after that, I heard a screech and scuttering away. I reloaded and repeated this until there was silence outside the cabin. "What do we do?" Mike said. "Get the heck out of here," Marie and Anne both said in different ways. I held a hand up for them to be quiet, not convinced that these weird things were all gone. I looked out the windows again, and I could see things moving in the trees across the field. They were still out there, waiting. I told them what I saw. We stayed inside the cabin for hours, unsure of whether to stay or leave. Eventually, I stopped seeing movement in the trees, so we quietly and quickly packed up our things. The truck was only 10 feet away from the front door. I shone the flashlight around it and into the neighboring woods to make sure we were all clear. It seemed clear, so after locking the cabin door, we made a mad dash for the truck, throwing our stuff inside. We locked the truck doors too and started the engine. When the truck lights turned on, lighting up the driveway, we spotted one of those things running across the road. Taking a deep breath, I put the truck into drive. It jolted forward as I stepped on the gas heavily. Going down the driveway and out onto the road, we saw movement everywhere. The forest seemed to be crawling with shadows. I was so terrified. My eyes burned. I didn't want to shut them for a minute. We turned onto the main road, where I saw one of those things sitting on the road. I pressed on the gas and went over 90 on the dirt road, and I aimed right for it. But when I passed over it, it just stood up on bent limbs and slowly walked away, its eyes never reflecting any light, like gray pools on the all-black leathery-looking thing. It watched us leave. We didn't stop until we were back in the city. It was around 6 a.m. then when we pulled up into the apartment complex. Honestly, we were surprised we weren't pulled over by how fast I was going. After that, we went up and fell asleep in my apartment, absolutely exhausted. My brother and I don't like talking about what happened back then, and our girlfriends broke up with us weeks later after that. We talked our father into selling the cabin after months of convincing, and I would like to say it's over, but it's not. I still have nightmares where I'm stuck in that cabin, and those things are scratching at the walls and floor. When they finally break through, I wake up. I want to know what they are. I want closure. I am tempted to go back every few years to see if they're still there or if they moved on. Why did they choose to come after us? I want to know. Maybe someone can hear my description and know what these things are, and why they came after 4 young adults just looking for a peaceful trip in the woods. Here's the description from me and my brother combined. They were black and leathery looking, about 4.5 to 5 feet tall, with about 4 claw-like fingers and toes. They had gray, large eyes that don't reflect light, with a skinny body and limbs. They crawled around but sometimes would stand up on 2 legs. Their back legs were bent the wrong way. We couldn't really see the mouth from how far they were from us, but the screeching made our eardrums shake with how loud it was. They're fast and hard to see, and they waited until night to come after us as a pack. If you know what these monstrous things are, please, let us know. I have to know. The Bones from the Fire. From Anonymous. I live in a town in Scotland. It's mostly urban, but we do have a good amount of rural areas. This story happened when I was in primary school. I was 9 years old. I lived in a house very close to the rural areas of the town. These rural areas had loads of abandoned places as part of them, and my friends and I would go to hang out at them. It was summer break at the time. Me and my 2 friends, T and E, decided we'd go and explore the old abandoned graveyard that loads of people would hang out at. After getting some food and drinks from a shop, we went down the long, narrow road that led to the old graveyard. We passed some farms and joked about the smell of cow manure coming from E, and were making other dumb 9-year-old jokes, until we made it to the graveyard. Once there, we all stopped the constant joking, due to us being a bit creeped out, but not wanting to openly admit it. The graves were covered in moss, the names unreadable and hidden by the overgrowth. There were bottles and cans of empty drinks scattered all over the place, and the trees made it darker within. We climbed up onto the old broken-down small building there, sitting down and eating some food and drinks. After a few minutes of laughing together, T stopped and began to stare outside of the graveyard towards the open area near the river. I then looked over where he was looking and saw a group of people at a fire. We could slowly start to hear them shouting things, scaring us. Then a car came up to the graveyard, parking right outside of it, with no one getting out. The 3 of us decided we'd take another way back and ran up the hills that would take us eventually back to the houses, once we ran far enough. While we ran, we could hear the group shouting stuff still. Then a scream came from someone. I didn't look back, but T did. The other people saw him, and one shouted at him to come down to them. But we just kept running after that. 30 minutes later, we were near the houses and a store, but we were still on the farmland. I tripped as I was running, which I'm kind of glad I did, as T then put his hand on an electric fence in front of us, and E had to pull him off of it. That was almost me. It left T with a scar, and the fence surrounded us from getting back to the streets of our town. This meant we had to go back, so we did. When we got to where that group had been, they were gone now, and their campfire had been put out. E ran over to it. When he came back, he brought bones. There was what I could only describe as a deformed bull skull due to the horns on it. E took the skull and bones with him, and we eventually got back to our houses. We played outside at the park for a while. Some boys came over to us and asked E where he got those bones. He told them from a fire near the river. The boys said those bones were cursed, that we had to get rid of them. E put them in the bin in the park, and we all went home, scared of being cursed. The following day, the bones were all gone. However, everything else was still in the bin. This left us 3 to wonder, why would someone bin raid for those bones? If it was just a trash collector, then why only take the bones from the top? We promised each other we would never go back down there, and as far as I know, the 3 of us haven't. I moved to a more urban part of town. A new place meant a new school, and that meant I stopped talking to E. In our last year of primary, E pulled a knife on T, but fortunately someone spotted him. T's parents got a divorce, and he started doing substances in his 3rd year of high school. He then got sent to a behavioral school, and we've only spoken about 3 times since. During my 2nd year of high school, my house burned down, and now as I write this, I'm starting to wonder if that so-called curse had anything to do with any of the bad stuff happening to us. Although it's unlikely, I still can't help but wonder about it. What were those strangers doing during the summer break? Why did they seem so hostile when they saw us? It makes me wonder what they were up to. It's been about 7 years now, and I haven't returned to that graveyard, although some other friends have, including T's cousin. But from what I've heard, the most unusual thing they experienced were wind chimes shaking about and clanging against each other, despite there being no wind at all. Out of all the abandoned places I've been to, and all these strange experiences I've had, those bones were what scared me the most. Bigfoot in remote Maine. From Claymore. My dad's cousin owns a camp in a remote part of the state of Maine, 3 hours from where I live. We go up there with him 2 to 3 times a year to hunt partridge and go fishing. It's such a fun experience to go up there and do things away from the rest of society. It's an introvert's dream, so to speak. This particular trip was quite a bit different from the other trips. We'd spent Friday evening, Saturday, and half of a Sunday up there fishing. We never caught much of anything, but it was still fun to do. We had spent most of Sunday morning packing up our food, sleeping bags, clothes, etc. We spent a few more hours fishing off the dock and just chatting about things from the past, things we hoped to do in the future. Basic discussion. It was around 10 a.m. then, and my dad asked, "All right, bud, you ready to leave?" "Sure," I replied. It was always hard to leave that place because of how beautiful the sunrises were. I figured we would see some wildlife on the ride out, so I looked forward to that. We jumped in the truck and pulled out of the camp driveway. I watched the small house slowly fade into nothing as we drove down the road. The road to get in and out of there is around 15 miles long, so we were in for a treat. We were around 7 miles down the road when we both got thirsty. He stopped the truck to check on the four-wheeler and to get us some Gatorade. That morning the air was brisk and the leaves on the trees were almost gone. It was towards the end of fall. Suddenly something caught my eye in the trees. I looked over near a large oak tree and I saw something that I couldn't yet explain. I saw this black hairy arm wrapped around the tree and a head poking around the tree from side to side. Whatever it was, it seemed quite curious. Then it darted away from the tree and ran up the hill. It stopped at the top of that hill. We made eye contact one last time before it went over the other side of the hill. It was around 7 feet tall and had thick black hair. Its arms looked strong and muscular. Now, I knew my dad was a Bigfoot skeptic, so I asked him if he'd seen that bear. "No, where was it?" he asked. "It ran up that hill," I replied, pointing in the direction I saw it. "Cool, dude," my dad exclaimed. The whole drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about the whole experience. Sometimes I wonder if it was a bear, or if I was seeing things. I just can't convince myself that the thing wasn't a Bigfoot. I looked on the BFRO website and saw that there were several sightings in that part of Maine. I believe, without a doubt, that what I saw was a Bigfoot. The Ghosts Down by the River. From Skull Z. My friend and I were going down to the nearby river to just hang out and make a campfire. Let's call him L. Every time we go down there, we walk past a car crashed into a tree. I can't be sure if it actually crashed, or if it was simply abandoned there. But there was a lot of trash down the hill too. Past that tree is just more hill that goes down farther, and down there is full of trash. We could also smell that trash, mostly rotten deer. Elle and I were walking past that car when we heard a scream down there. At first, we thought our friends were in the car trying to scare us. We looked down at the car but didn't see anyone. Then we looked at each other, a bit worried. The scream came again then, but this time we knew it wasn't in the car because the scream was farther down. "Dude, what the heck is that?" Elle asked. I don't know," I told him. The scream happened once more. If I had to describe it, it sounded like a guy, not too harsh, but also fake, if that makes sense. "No, dude, we're getting out of here," Elle said, shivering. We turned around, and before we could walk away, we could see a truck coming towards us. We waved to say hi. Then we saw a person get out. I think he was coming out to greet us because I think he knew Elle. We told him about the screaming we heard. Then he explained, "Be careful out here. Loved ones and other people have passed away down there." "Why do we need to be careful?" Elle asked. I thought, why would he ask that? Doesn't he know there are dangerous animals out there? That's what I expected this person to explain. But instead, we received this answer. "Because you don't want to anger the spirits down there. You may have to be quiet coming down here so you won't disturb them." Elle and I were both being loud walking down. I looked down at the bottom of the hill and yelled, "Sorry." After that, I felt bad, because I thought I sounded a bit too sarcastic or something. When I looked back at the guy, he looked upset. "Well, you be careful now. I'll see you later." He bid us farewell, then went back to his truck. He backed up out of there and left. I wondered why he stopped by then. Why had he driven this direction? After all, he never even went down to the river. After that, we changed our minds and continued to walk down there. We even threw rocks down the hill. I know it was stupid after hearing about possible spirits down there. But after rolling an especially big rock, I'm talking big, one we couldn't even pick up together, a second later, we heard a little girl scream. This one wasn't soft like the guy's scream. This one was loud, and it hurt my ears. The reason this was unusual was because there was no possible way a little girl could get past all these sticker bushes and brush down there. Nobody really could. There were no paths or anything, and yet we heard people screaming just beyond it. We looked at each other again and started walking back up the trail to a church that was close to the path. I'm not sure if this is scary to you, but it scared us nonetheless. We still go down to the river sometimes, but here on out we're more cautious, never throwing rocks down there again. I hope that whatever is down there isn't especially mad at us. Camping trip gone wrong. From Bigboithanos. My brother, his girlfriend, my sister, my parents, and I were going on a camping trip. I was 15 at the time. I just went through a breakup with my girlfriend and was depressed, being quiet 80% of the time. My parents kept telling me to cheer up. They could tell I was trying but wasn't really able to. The day we went camping, we were nearly to our campsite when suddenly we ran into two guys. Both of them were tall and had messy hair, and they smelled like straight up garbage. They asked if we knew where they could find the lake. My dad politely pointed out where to go and how to get there. But something in my gut told me that these two were bad news. They went on their way, then we went on ours. When we made it to the campsite, we set up the tents and the campfire. After that, my big brother and I went off to go hunting. I was the better hunter of the two of us. My brother had his own rifle but wanted to learn from me. After a bit of a hike, I noticed multiple pairs of boot prints in some mud. I was confused because they looked fresh. Now, we were hunting on our land. There should have been no one else in this area. I brushed it off and showed my brother how to hunt a deer. We managed to bag one and bring it back for dinner. The best part of camping for us was eating what we hunted. When nightfall came, I was probably the only one up in my tent still. I was drawing in my notebook. That's when I heard my sister get out of her tent and walk into the woods. I got up and followed her with my rifle. I called out to her, "What are you doing up so late?" She jumped at this and turned around, relieved that it was just me. She punched me for scaring her. She said she was going out for a walk and a smoke. I told her she's gonna need a guide, and she said that's fine, because she was always scared of being lost. We walked together for a few minutes, talking about life, but then I heard something walking nearby. I told her to stop, and I pulled out my rifle. I waited to see what it was, but because of how dark it was difficult to see anything. My sister had a flashlight, but she said that the batteries were dead. I muttered, "Great," and I told her to stay behind me in a whisper. She did as I told her. I yelled out asking who's there. Then one of those two guys from before came out of the darkness. I asked him what he's doing out here so late. He said something along the lines of, "None of your darn business." He glanced behind me for a moment. Instinctively, I turned around, grabbing my sister's hand and running all the way back to the campsite. My sister and I dived into my tent since I left it unzipped. I could hear footsteps around the campsite. My heart sank when I heard a knife gliding across my tent. The two of us backed up against the other side of it. I reached for my rifle, but then the knife stopped. Someone outside laughed. Then whoever it was cut the tent open. One of those two men tried to climb inside, but I kicked at them, and my sister screamed. Everyone in the campsite woke up. They came rushing over, but those two men left right away. We called 911 and a ranger. The area was searched. They found the two guys, and worst of all, they found two bodies of missing people. That's as far as I can comfortably say with this story, except one last thing. My family and I never went camping again after that. That brings us to the end of this episode of Darkness Prevails. More terrifying stories are on the way soon, so subscribe and smash that like button. By the way, did you know this show is available as a podcast called Unexplained Encounters? Just search for, follow, and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. This show is part of the EerieCast network. Go to EerieCast.com for more scary podcasts, such as Freaky Folklore, which explores your favorite monsters, myths, and mysteries, as well as Redwood Bureau, a fictional horror podcast about an agent on the run from an evil secret organization that captures supernatural creatures and entities. Well, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.